Welcome back to Comedy Hype. This is your segment, No Capital, with me, Marcus Board. Today it was announced that Texas Governor Greg Abbott has just signed a law forcing all state-funded colleges and universities to close their diversity, equity, and inclusion offices. The law states that any public college or university that does not certify it in its compliance with the new measure will not be able to spend state funds allocated to it. This decision comes as the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to ban colleges and universities from considering race as a factor in their admissions decisions later this month. Woo! Here, yeah, exactly. So what we're seeing here is the rollback of the gains of the Black Power movement, right? So we've already seen with the Civil Rights Movement, the rollback of voting and housing and education rights. And the Republican Party is systematically across the country using their rights in the state level to now roll back the gains of Black Power. Black Power, of course, started at San Francisco State. A lot of the work that was going on there with Huey Newton and the Black Panthers was pushing us towards integrating our understanding of education and intellect with our social movements. And so the Republican Party has been ahead of the curve every step of the way, at least ahead of the Democratic Party, which as Black people, we know they're not always in the lead that we need them to be in. They're not necessarily always fighting the way that we should. So this is just another state in Texas that continues to have these problems. And it's something that if we don't fight back, if we don't resist, we're going to continue to see some of the issues in our communities that we've been seeing, and they're only going to get worse. Pierre, I want to bring you in. What you got to say about this? What you feeling? How you thinking?
Do me a favor. I understand it, but give me another recap of what he's trying to pull out. Like you said, diversity. So in different schools, he won't fund diversity programs. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So there are people at these universities whose job it is to create programming, to create opportunities, to create spaces for people who are not typically served in the college and university space. And so what Greg Abbott is doing is saying that in his state, y'all can't come. Y'all are not allowed to work here. You're not going to have your jobs here. And if you choose to continue to fund DEI, then we're not going to give you state funding. The federal government did something very similar in the past where they told states, hey, if you don't comply with some of our federal rules, particularly even the Civil Rights Act, then we're not going to give you funding for highways. Right. And so it's basically him playing a game of chicken and saying, hey, if you don't want this, fine. We're very comfortable defunding education because that's not something we prioritize anyway. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, but they're teaching they're teaching American history, right? In those schools with no problems, right? So they're teaching the whiter version of stuff. So he's cool with that kind of stuff.
That's right.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in Texas, vote that fool out. Shit.
Yeah. And that's one of the big things too, Pierre, I think, is that I call them voteps. It's the people who say that voting is the only way to solve any of these issues. And voting is important. Don't get me on Comedy Hype talking about voting doesn't matter. But we got to do more than vote. The same way we say our ancestors died for the right to vote, they fight it for the right to organize too. They fight it for the right to resist. They fight it for the right to live their lives in the ways that they saw best, right? Being free isn't just our ability to go to these schools. It's also our ability to tell people like Greg Abbott that the way that you see the world isn't good enough and that we deserve the right to define our lives and define our experiences the way that we want to. So it's something that I think requires us to really push the Democratic Party, but also to push ourselves to see what we can do outside of that. And so, as we got this movement kind of going on, and we know that in 2020 with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, people really kind of amped up. It's still going to take very deliberate effort and organizing for us to be able to do this work in a way that changes our own futures. So we gotta mount up as my Texas Forces show.
I know that's right. And one thing I remember CRT being pushed out of a lot of, they didn't want that program. Am I not mistaken? Florida rocked out at first, now Texas. So we're moving. It's a movement of getting this stuff out of schools. So I think if one place sees it, Florida, then all of a sudden Texas saw Florida get away with it. Now Texas, next thing like Georgia, Tennessee. Is that going to be pretty much a rollout? You thinking like that unless we stop it?
It's one of those things where strategically that the Republican Party does have a larger plan. I don't think that focusing on every single instance of them rolling out that plan is useful, as much as it's to say we have to figure out ways to support voting rights, to get people in those states empowered, right? So a lot of times, as we were talking about earlier, when we were comparing Chris Tucker and Martin, right? A lot of times people will be like, well, my state's good and your state is trash, so we just not gonna go there. And that eliminates the opportunity to organize and connect with the people who are living in that apartheid state. And so it's really important for us to intervene, but also to remain connected. The further apart we get on these conversations and issues, the harder things get. And to be very clear, when I say further apart, I don't mean saying that everybody needs to get in line with the racial justice initiatives. What I mean is that all these oppressions are linked. And so I need to understand how Symphony is hurt. I need to understand how you are hurt. I need to know how y'all's life experiences are different than mine so that we can draw the connections between them. And a lot of the times, learning stuff like that happens in colleges and universities. So it's really important that we fight back in a broad space and make sure that we come together when we do that.
Yeah, let me chime in, Marcus, and I'll read a comment because of course people are chiming in on this, and I'll just read one because I have a very important question for you. So one user said, "This is called desperation and fear of Black and Brown planet. Obama drove them crazy and they are trying their hardest to turn back the clock. Nothing is constant but change. They are scared to death." Now, first, Marcus, I want to say we're honored to have you on this platform to be able to give this information. Howard is honored to have you as well. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Something that you mentioned is, hey, we need to fight back. We need to push back. And I absolutely agree. Some people may not know what to do. And I think you maybe listed some things, but just to kind of recap, how do we fight back? How do we push back? What are some actionable items that people can do to, help and be a part of this movement that want to, but they just may not know what to do?
And I appreciate the question, and I'm very grateful to be here with you all too. One of the things that people forget is that when social movements happen, when the civil rights movement happened, when this most recent movement for Black Lives is happening, and all these different movements happen for decades throughout, fighting for people's lives, saving people, creating spaces in their houses, right? There are so many different ways that we can simply open up our lives to make space for other people who have needs. And that simple act alone, we saw that during COVID when people were doing a whole bunch of mutual aid work. So this type of work, this interpersonal work, this connected work, this thing where you say that what happens in your life matters to what happens in my life, that isn't a substanceless effort. That actually is powerful, and it changes people's lives. So I think a lot of times we get caught up in thinking it needs to be huge. We get caught up in thinking that revolution is a moment, it's this big explosive thing, and once it happens, it's done, as opposed to thinking that the everyday ways that we live our lives is how revolution is created. I know revolutionaries who are creating revolutionary spaces as we speak, in the midst of all the struggle and all the problems that we have. And knowing that you can create it in your circle and you can create that change in your life and in your space and be a part of communities that are doing that work, I think that's what's most important. And I've done work in Texas. I've done a lot of work with Young Leaders Strong City in Dallas, a youth organizing group that tries to help teach radical politics to young people who are in a space that is under attack in their educational institutions. And so doing that type of work is a privilege for me. And I have to then on my end do my due diligence. I have to go do the reading. I have to know what I'm talking about. And most importantly, and this is the part people struggle with the most, I have to listen. And so learning from other people, and that's what I've been pushing every step of the way on No Capital. Learning from other people is the key to success. Connecting with people is the key to our future. And our liberation is impossible unless we do it all together.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I definitely learned something here because I was telling all my friends, y'all got to stop going to Florida, but now I understand that my people in the Florida, I'm leaving them out. So I learned something today. I appreciate you so much. Marcus, before you head out, how can people keep up with all the wonderful things that you're doing before we let you go?
I'm at marcusboard.com. I'm on all socials as Prof. MBJ, Marcus Board Jr. I'm also a professor at Howard University, very proud. Check me out, come see what we're working on.
Absolutely. And speaking of coming to see what we're working on, I'm going to keep pushing this. June 27th, we're going to be live right here in Atlanta where, if you like conversations like this, if you like being able to talk about our culture, talk about the comedy space, join us live in Atlanta, June 27th. And I'm so excited for everybody to come out.